The bright morning sun streamed through the massive glass windows of Westfield International Airport as David Taylor made his way through the busy main terminal. Just 17 years old with bright eyes full of determination, he had arrived 3 hours early for his flight to the National Youth Science Conference in Boston, where he was set to present his research project that had taken him months to complete. David adjusted his backpack on his shoulder and glanced down at the VIP lounge access card hanging from a lanyard around his neck. His mom had insisted he use it. "You need a quiet place to go over your notes one last time," she had told him with that proud smile he knew so well. As he approached the entrance to the Premium Travelers Lounge, David felt a bit out of place in his simple jeans, favorite blue hoodie, and white sneakers. All around him, business travelers in expensive suits rolled designer luggage while tapping away on their phones. An older gentleman in a tailored gray suit gave him a quick once-over before looking away. "Good morning," David said politely to the attendant at the desk, a woman with straight blonde hair pulled back into a tight bun. Her name tag read Patricia. He held up his access card. "I'm here to use the lounge before my flight." Patricia's smile tightened as her eyes moved from his casual clothes to the card. "May I see that, please?" Her voice carried a note of doubt that David tried to ignore. "Sure." He handed over the card, which clearly displayed the airport's logo and the words "Premium XCCSS" in gold lettering. Patricia examined the card carefully, turning it over as if searching for signs of forgery. "And this is yours?" "Yes, ma'am. My mom arranged it for me." "I see." Her tone suggested she didn't quite believe him. She reluctantly handed back the card. "Very well. The lounge is through those doors." David thanked her and walked inside, immediately feeling the calm atmosphere wash over him. Soft music played in the background. Comfortable leather chairs were arranged around low tables, and a buffet of breakfast items lined one wall. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a perfect view of planes taking off and landing. He found a quiet corner and settled into a plush chair, taking out his laptop and notes. His presentation on innovative water filtration systems for developing countries was important, and he wanted to be fully prepared. As he began reviewing his slides, he didn't notice two staff members watching him from behind the refreshment counter. "He doesn't look like he belongs here," one whispered to the other. "Should we check on him again?" The other shrugged. Patricia already let him in, but keep an eye on him. David was too focused on his work to notice their suspicious glances. He had spent the past year developing a low-cost filtration system that could be built from locally available materials in rural communities. His science teacher had been so impressed that she'd nominated him for the conference. About 20 minutes into his review session, David got up to get some water and a small plate of fruit. He could feel eyes following him as he moved around the lounge. An older businesswoman clutched her purse tighter as he walked past her table. A man in a suit supplely moved his laptop bag closer to his chair. David pretended not to notice. He was used to this kind of treatment, though it never stopped hurting. He returned to his seat with his water and fruit, diving back into his presentation to distract himself from the uncomfortable atmosphere. Later, as he was jotting down some additional talking points, he noticed Patricia from the front desk speaking with another staff member, both of them glancing in his direction. The second employee, a middle-aged man with a supervisor badge, frowned as he looked at David. David took a deep breath and continued working. He just needed to focus on his presentation. In 6 hours, he would be in Boston, representing his school and sharing his ideas with young scientists from across the country. Nothing else mattered right now. David had been working quietly for almost an hour when he noticed a woman with a sleek bob haircut and a crisp blue uniform making her way directly toward him. Her name tag read Linda, and she wore the pinched expression of someone about to handle an unpleasant task. Several passengers watched with interest as she approached. "Excuse me, young man," Linda said, her voice just a bit too loud. "I need to see your access credentials again." David looked up from his laptop. "Sure," he said, lifting the lanyard from around his neck and holding it out to her. "Here you go." Linda took the card between two fingers as if it might be contaminated. She studied it carefully, turning it over and holding it up to the light. "How did you get this card?" she asked, her tone making it clear she already had her suspicions. "My mother arranged it for me," David explained patiently. I'm traveling to Boston for a science conference, and she wanted me to have a quiet place to prepare. A few nearby business travelers had stopped pretending not to listen and were now openly watching the interaction. An older man in a business suit frowned and whispered something to his companion. "And what's your mother's name?" Linda asked, crossing her arms. "Michelle Taylor," David replied, beginning to feel uncomfortable with the public scrutiny. Linda's eyebrows rose. "And how exactly did Michelle Taylor get access to our premium lounge passes?" The way she said his mother's name made David's stomach tighten. He took a deep breath. "She has the appropriate connections," he said simply, not wanting to share more information with someone who clearly didn't believe him. "I see," Linda said, not bothering to hide her disbelief. "Do you have any other identification? A student ID, perhaps?" David reached for his wallet and pulled out his high school ID card, complete with his photo and school information. He handed it to Linda. She glanced at it briefly. "This doesn't match your lounge access. The names are different." "What?" David leaned forward to look. "That's not possible. It should say Taylor." "This card says Premier Guest with no name," Linda said, tapping the lounge access card. "It's not a personal card. These are typically issued to corporate accounts." "My mom said it was arranged through her work," David explained, trying to keep his voice steady. He could feel his heart beating faster as more people turned to watch. An elderly woman sitting nearby suddenly stood up and moved to a different section of the lounge, clutching her handbag tightly. The gesture wasn't lost on David or Linda. "Look," Linda said, lowering her voice, "we've had several complaints from other guests who are concerned about your presence here. Without proper documentation, I'm going to have to ask you to leave the lounge." "Complaints?" David asked, genuinely confused. "I've been sitting here quietly working on my presentation. I haven't bothered anyone." Linda's lips pressed into a thin line. "Sir, if you can't provide additional verification that you belong here, I'll need to call security." A middle-aged woman at the next table spoke up. "He's been perfectly well behaved. Why are you harassing him?" Linda turned to the woman. "Ma'am, this is an airport security matter. I'm just following protocol." "I've been watching," the woman continued. "You haven't asked anyone else for additional verification, just him." David felt a mix of gratitude and embarrassment as the woman defended him. He didn't want to cause a scene, but he also knew he had every right to be there. "I can call my mother if that would help," David offered, reaching for his phone. "She can explain." "That won't be necessary," Linda said firmly. "Our policy is clear. If we cannot verify your right to access this lounge, you need to leave." She gestured toward the exit. "But I have verified it," David said, his frustration growing. "I showed you my card and my ID." Linda shook her head. "I'm sorry, but I'm going to have to call security if you won't comply." David looked around at the faces watching him, some curious, some uncomfortable, some openly hostile. He had done nothing wrong, yet he was being treated like a criminal. With a sinking feeling, he realized this wasn't going to be resolved easily. The tension in the VIP lounge grew thicker as Linda reached for the radio clipped to her belt. "I need security at the Premium Travelers Lounge," she said, her eyes never leaving David's face. "We have an unauthorized person who refuses to leave." "That's not true," David protested, feeling his cheeks grow warm. "I haven't refused anything. I'm just trying to explain that I have permission to be here." A small crowd had gathered nearby, some passengers pretending to read magazines while stealing glances at the unfolding scene, others openly staring. David noticed a few people had their phones out, discreetly recording the interaction. Within minutes, a uniformed security officer strode through the lounge doors. He was tall with broad shoulders and a stern expression that suggested he'd already made up his mind about the situation. His badge read Officer Wilson. "What seems to be the problem here?" Officer Wilson asked, directing his question to Linda rather than David. "This young man is using a lounge access card that doesn't belong to him," Linda explained, handing the card to the officer. "When asked to leave, he refused." "I did not refuse," David said firmly, trying to keep his voice steady. "And the card does belong to me. My mother arranged it through her company." Officer Wilson barely glanced at David before turning the card over in his hands. "Son, where did you get this card?" David took a deep breath. He'd been asked this question 3 times now, and each repetition made him feel more like a criminal. As I've already explained twice, my mother arranged it for me through her work. I'm traveling to Boston for a science conference. Unlikely story, Officer Wilson muttered, just loud enough for David to hear. Then louder. Do you have any proof of that? Any documentation connecting you to this card? How could I possibly have documentation? David asked, his frustration breaking through. It's an access card, not a credit card. It doesn't have my name on it because it doesn't need to. It just grants access, which is what the desk attendant confirmed when I first arrived. The officer's expression hardened. Watch your tone, young man. You need to gather your belongings and come with me now. The woman who had spoken up earlier rose from her seat. Excuse me, but this is ridiculous. He's just a teenager waiting for his flight. Why are you treating him like a criminal? Ma'am, please stay out of this, Officer Wilson said without looking at her. This is an airport security matter. It's discrimination is what it is, the woman replied, crossing her arms. Several other passengers nodded in agreement, while others looked away uncomfortably. I'm not leaving, David said, his heart pounding. I have every right to be here, and I'm not going anywhere until my flight. If you want me to move, you'll have to physically remove me, and I assure you that will not look good for the airport when the videos of this encounter go viral. He gestured to the phones recording around them. A flicker of uncertainty crossed Officer Wilson's face. That sounds like a threat, the officer said, placing his hand meaningfully on the handcuffs attached to his belt. You don't want to make this worse for yourself. David swallowed hard. He hadn't expected things to escalate this far. His hands trembled slightly as he closed his laptop. Can I at least call my mother before you throw me out? She can clear this up in minutes. You can call whoever you want after we've removed you from the secure area, Officer Wilson replied. Now stand up and bring your things. A tall businessman in an expensive suit who had been watching from nearby suddenly approached. Officer, perhaps we could allow the young man to make his call here. I'm Richard Chen. I fly through this airport weekly, and I've never seen staff react this way to someone in the lounge. Officer Wilson hesitated, clearly recognizing the man's name. Mr. Chen, with all due respect, we have protocols. And I respect that, Mr. Chen interrupted smoothly. But surely those protocols allow for a simple phone call before things escalate unnecessarily? His tone was polite, but carried the unmistakable weight of influence. After a moment's consideration, Officer Wilson nodded reluctantly. Fine. 1 phone call. You have 2 minutes, he told David. And then you're coming with me, one way or another. With shaking fingers, David pulled out his phone and dialed his mother's number, praying she would answer. David held his phone to his ear, counting each ring with mounting anxiety. The entire lounge had fallen silent, watching him. On the 4th ring, his mother's voice came through. David, is everything okay? Aren't you supposed to be on your way to Boston? The relief in hearing her voice almost made him emotional. Mom, I need your help, he said, trying to keep his voice steady. I'm at the airport in the VIP lounge like you arranged, but security is trying to remove me. They don't believe I have permission to be here. There was a brief silence on the other end. Put them on the phone, his mother said, her tone shifting instantly from concerned to commanding. David held out the phone to Officer Wilson. My mother wants to speak with you. The officer hesitated before taking the phone. This is Airport Security Officer Wilson. Who am I speaking with? David couldn't hear his mother's exact words, but he could tell from Officer Wilson's changing expression that she wasn't mincing words. The officer's confident demeanor faltered as he listened. Yes, ma'am, I understand, but protocols? Yes, no, I wasn't informed of that. His face had begun to redden slightly. Of course, we take these matters very seriously. I see. Yes, ma'am. Officer Wilson looked increasingly uncomfortable as the conversation continued. Linda, the customer service representative, shifted nervously from foot to foot beside him. The onlookers watched with interest, sensing the turning tide. She wants to speak with you again, Officer Wilson said finally, handing the phone back to David with noticeably more respect than before. Mom? David asked, taking the phone. Listen carefully, his mother said, her voice calm but intense. I've told them who I am, but they're still going to try to handle this quietly. Officer Wilson knows he's made a mistake, but he's hoping to smooth it over without making a scene. Don't let them rush you out of there. I'm on my way. I was at the downtown office for a meeting, so I'm only about 15 minutes away. David nodded, then remembered she couldn't see him. Okay. Stay exactly where you are. Don't let them move you from that lounge. I've made it clear that if they touch you or force you to leave before I arrive, there will be serious consequences. Keep your phone on and recording. I love you. Love you too, Mom, David said, ending the call. He looked up at Officer Wilson and Linda, who were exchanging nervous glances. My mother will be here in 15 minutes, David announced, sitting back down in his chair. She's asked me to wait right here for her. Officer Wilson cleared his throat. Perhaps we could continue this conversation in a more private setting. There's a security office just down the corridor where we could wait for your mother more comfortably. David remembered his mother's warning and shook his head. No, thank you. I'm comfortable right here. He placed his phone on the table, screen up, and pressed the record button. The red recording light blinked steadily. Is that really necessary? Linda asked, eyeing the phone. My mother suggested it, David replied simply. Mr. Chen, the businessman who had intervened earlier, smiled faintly from his nearby seat. A few other passengers who had been watching nodded approvingly. Fine, Officer Wilson said through gritted teeth. We'll wait 15 minutes. The next quarter hour was possibly the most awkward of David's life. Officer Wilson stood stiffly nearby, occasionally speaking into his radio in hushed tones. Linda had retreated to the reception desk, but kept glancing nervously toward the lounge entrance. The regular lounge attendants moved about with forced cheerfulness, offering drinks and snacks to the other passengers while carefully avoiding David's corner. David tried to return to his presentation notes, but concentration was impossible now. Instead, he found himself repeatedly checking the time on his phone and glancing toward the entrance. What exactly had his mother said to make Officer Wilson back down so quickly? And what would happen when she arrived? As the 15-minute mark approached, David noticed a flurry of activity near the lounge entrance. Several staff members in suits had gathered, speaking urgently among themselves. One of them, a man with graying hair and an expensive watch, looked particularly agitated. David's phone buzzed with a text. I'm here. Don't move. All heads turned as the lounge doors swung open. A woman in her mid-40s walked in with a kind of confidence that commanded attention without asking for it. She wore a perfectly tailored navy blue suit, her hair styled in a neat shoulder-length bob. Two men in suits followed a respectful distance behind her. David immediately stood up. Mom. Michelle Taylor's eyes found her son across the room, and her professional mask softened for just a moment. She quickly assessed him from head to toe, making sure he was okay, before her expression hardened again as she turned toward Officer Wilson and Linda. The gray-haired man who had been nervously pacing rushed forward. Mrs. Taylor, I'm Thomas Walker, Director of Customer Relations. We are so sorry for any misunderstanding. Michelle held up one hand, stopping him mid-sentence. We'll get to you in a moment, Thomas. She walked directly to her son, giving him a brief hug. Aren't you all right? I'm fine, Mom, David said quietly. Just embarrassed. She squeezed his shoulder and whispered, You have nothing to be embarrassed about. Then she turned to face Officer Wilson, who was now standing ramrod straight. You must be Officer Wilson, she said, her voice cool and measured. And you, she continued, looking at Linda, are the staff member who decided my son didn't belong in this lounge. Linda swallowed visibly. Mrs. Taylor, there seems to have been a misunderstanding. No misunderstanding, Michelle cut in. My son showed you his valid access card, explained that his mother had arranged it, and instead of making a simple phone call to verify, you called security and threatened to have him removed. Thomas Walker stepped forward again. Mrs. Taylor, if we could discuss this privately. No, Thomas, we will not be discussing this privately, Michelle said firmly. This happened publicly. My son was humiliated publicly. So we will address it publicly. She looked around the lounge at the watching passengers. For those who don't know me, I'm Michelle Taylor, CEO and majority owner of Westfield Airport Holdings. A ripple of shock moved through the room. Linda's face drained of color. Officer Wilson's eyes widened. Which means, Michelle continued, that I not only own this airport, but I'd also own this lounge, the airline that operates from Terminal B, and the security company that employs Officer Wilson. The silence in the room was absolute. Even the usual airport announcements seemed to have paused. Now, Michelle said, turning back to Thomas, "You're going to explain to me why my son was treated like a criminal while simply using the facilities I provided for him." Thomas looked like he might faint. "Mrs. Taylor, I assure you this is not how we train our staff to behave." "This is an isolated incident." "Is it?" Michelle interrupted. "Because from where I'm standing, this looks like profiling. Plain and simple." "We don't profile our customers," Thomas protested weakly. Mr. Chen, the businessman who had helped David earlier, spoke up from his seat. "With all due respect, sir, that's exactly what happened. I've been using this lounge 3 times a week for 5 years. I've never once been asked to verify my access card after entry, let alone been threatened with removal." Several other passengers nodded in agreement. Michelle smiled tightly at Mr. Chen. "Thank you for speaking up, and thank you for helping my son." She turned back to Thomas. "I want Officer Wilson and Linda in my office in 1 hour with their supervisors, and I want the security footage from this lounge preserved immediately." Thomas nodded rapidly. "Of course, Mrs. Taylor, right away." Michelle then addressed Officer Wilson directly. "You threatened to handcuff my 17-year-old son for sitting quietly in a lounge he had every right to be in. Would you like to explain why?" Officer Wilson looked at his shoes. "I was responding to a call about an unauthorized person. I was following protocol." "Protocol?" Michelle raised an eyebrow. "Is it protocol to threaten minors? To make assumptions based on appearances? To ignore valid credentials?" Before Officer Wilson could answer, David touched his mother's arm. "Mom, my flight to Boston is in an hour and a half." Michelle's expression softened as she looked at her son. "Don't worry about that," she said. "You'll get to your conference." She turned to Thomas. "I think it's time we showed my son exactly how VIP travelers should be treated at Westfield International, don't you?" The next 30 minutes passed in a blur. David watched in amazement as his mother transformed from angry parent to commanding CEO, issuing directives that sent staff scurrying in all directions. Thomas Walker had pulled out his phone and was making urgent calls, occasionally wiping sweat from his forehead. "I've arranged for a private conference room," Michelle told David, her voice gentler now that they had a moment alone. "The airport's executive team is gathering there. I want to address this immediately." "What about my flight?" David asked, glancing at his watch. "Don't worry," Michelle assured him. "The Boston flight has been informed of a VIP passenger who may be slightly delayed. They won't leave without you." She smiled slightly at his surprised expression. There are some advantages to owning the airline. A tall woman in a crisp black suit approached them. "Mrs. Taylor, the conference room is ready. And Mr. Lee, the head of security, has arrived." "Thank you, Alice," Michelle replied. "Could you please make sure David has something to eat? He's been through quite an ordeal." As Alice led David to a private dining area within the lounge, he noticed Linda and Officer Wilson sitting stiffly in a corner, looking like they were awaiting execution. Other staff members gave them a wide berth. "Your mother is quite something," Alice commented as she arranged for a meal. "I've worked here for 12 years and never seen the executive team mobilize this quickly." David nodded, unsure how to respond. He'd always known his mother was important. He'd grown up with her late nights and business trips, but seeing her authority in action was different from knowing about it abstractly. While he ate, David noticed several of the passengers who had witnessed the incident approaching him. The first was Mr. Chen, who placed a business card on the table. "If you need a witness statement for whatever comes next, please call me," he said kindly. "What happened today was unacceptable." "Thank you for speaking up," David replied, genuinely grateful. An elderly couple stopped by next. "We wanted to say how impressed we were with how you handled yourself," the woman said. "Many adults wouldn't have remained so composed." One by one, passengers came to express support, share similar experiences, or simply to introduce themselves to the son of Michelle Taylor. David felt a strange mix of emotions: embarrassment about the incident, pride in his mother, and a growing sense of responsibility. After about an hour, Michelle returned to the private dining area, looking slightly less tense than before. "How did it go?" David asked. "It was a difficult but necessary conversation," she replied, sitting down across from him. This isn't just about what happened to you today, David. It's about a culture that needs to change. She explained that she had met with the airport's management team and security heads. I made it clear that while individual staff will face consequences, this is a systemic issue that requires systemic solutions. Are Linda and Officer Wilson going to lose their jobs? David asked, surprising himself with his concern for the very people who had humiliated him. Michelle studied her son thoughtfully. That was my first instinct, she admitted. But termination alone doesn't solve the underlying problem. Instead, they'll undergo comprehensive retraining and will be part of developing new protocols for guest verification and conflict resolution. She reached across the table and squeezed his hand. I'm proud of how you handled yourself today. Many people would have lost their temper or backed down. David shrugged, uncomfortable with the praise. I just did what seemed right. That's exactly what makes me proud, Michelle smiled. Now we need to get you to your gate. Your flight leaves in 40 minutes, and despite what I said earlier, I'd rather not actually delay an entire plane. As they walked through the terminal, David noticed the difference in how staff reacted to them, a mixture of deference, curiosity, and in some cases, genuine respect. The same security checkpoint that had barely glanced at him on his way and now had a senior officer personally escorting them through. At the gate, Michelle hugged her son tightly. Knock them dead at that conference, she said. And call me when you land. I will, David promised. And Mom? Thanks for coming so quickly. Always, she replied simply. No matter what, I'll always come when you need me. 3 months had passed since the incident at Westfield International Airport. David sat in his college dorm room, putting the finishing touches on a presentation for his new student organization, Fair Treatment for All. The group had grown quickly, attracting students from across campus who were passionate about addressing bias in public spaces. His phone buzzed with a text from his mother. Just landed. Meeting starts in an hour. Nervous. David smiled and texted back, You'll be great. They need to hear this. Today was an important day. His mother was unveiling a comprehensive new training program for all Westfield Airport Holdings employees. What had started as a personal humiliation had grown into something much bigger. David glanced at the framed newspaper article on his desk. The headline read, Airport CEO tackles bias after son's mistreatment. The story had gone viral after a passenger uploaded video of the confrontation. Rather than trying to hide from the publicity, his mother had embraced it as an opportunity for real change. His phone rang, displaying a familiar name. Hey, Mr. Chen, David answered. The businessman who had stood up for him that day had become something of a mentor over the past few months. All set for your mother's big presentation? Mr. Chen asked. As ready as she can be, David replied. She's been working on this program for months. I've seen the outline, Mr. Chen said. It's impressive. Most companies would have fired a couple of people and called it fixed. Your mother is actually addressing the root problems. After they hung up, David thought about Linda and Officer Wilson. To everyone's surprise, both had become deeply involved in developing the new training program. The experience had changed them in ways no one expected. David's roommate, Raj, walked in carrying 2 cups of coffee. Working on your presentation again? You're going to weigh yourself out before you even give it. Just making sure it's perfect, David said, accepting the coffee gratefully. The Student Council is voting tomorrow on whether to fund our initiative for campus security training. They'll approve it, Raj said confidently. Your story connected with a lot of people. David's phone buzzed again with another text, this time from Linda. On my way to the auditorium. Still can't believe I'm speaking at this. Thank you for believing people can change. That had been his mother's most controversial decision, not firing Linda and Officer Wilson, but instead making them part of the solution. People who've made mistakes and learned from them make the most convincing teachers, she had explained to skeptical board members. The local news had picked up the story last week when they announced that Officer Wilson was now heading a new division focused entirely on fair treatment training for security personnel. I never saw myself as biased, he had told reporters. That's the problem. None of us do. David checked the time and closed his laptop. He needed to head to his afternoon class, but he'd be watching the live stream of his mother's presentation afterward. Representatives from 3 other major airports would be there, interested in implementing similar programs. As he walked across campus, David reflected on how much had changed. The experience had been painful and humiliating, but it had also opened his eyes to the power of turning negative experiences into positive change. His new passion for advocacy had surprised even himself. His phone buzzed with a final text from his mother. "Linda just showed me the training video. Your interview segment is powerful. You should be proud." David smiled. He had hesitated when they first asked him to participate in the training videos, worried about reliving the experience. But the chance to speak directly to future airport employees about how it felt to be profiled had been too important to pass up. "The world doesn't change when we stay silent," his mother had reminded him. As David entered his classroom, he noticed someone watching a viral video on their phone, a compilation of airport incidents similar to his own. The difference was that now people were noticing, speaking up, recording. One incident had sparked awareness that was spreading across the country. Sometimes, David thought, the most powerful changes start with one painful moment and the courage to address it head-on. His mother had taught him that. And now, together, they were teaching others.